a chance to be here. And I will not take too much time. I know it's end of a long day. I see people wanting to head home, but I really want to thank Johnny for the chance to be here. He and I have been working together a lot on issues recently and talking about how we coordinate a bit better on things we're doing. And so I just wanted to take the time to come down here and speak to you and put a couple of ideas out on the table, but also offer, as always, especially with some of our officers or board members from UAC, to talk about what you'd like to see and what would be different. So let me do a couple of things really quickly. I love this thing. This is a very cool place to have a meeting. I love coming to this aquarium. The only problem is it always makes me really hungry. It's worse than the zoo, because look, doesn't that look so tasty? That'd be so good on a bit of miso would be absolutely fantastic. But anyway, that's all right.
He's thinking the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. He's too little now, but this guy down here, although that one doesn't actually eat people much, but anyway, it's pretty interesting. Well, let me just say a couple of things quickly. Johnny and I have been talking about issues of how we coordinate around education, and I think that was one of the primary reasons that he asked me to come to speak to this issue, or at this meeting. Because our concept, I think, as we've talked jointly, is we are very closely related organizations. We're two separate organizations, but the reality is that we're awfully closely allied. We have a lot of the same, we have all the same clients, and we have a lot of the same people on our boards and in decision-making capacities. We certainly serve all of the same people on staff level positions. So one of the things we're very interested in doing is trying to move forward on coordinating around educational issues and how we meet needs that UAC has by partnering with UCIP and how we share those responsibilities. One of the things that I believe is very true about UAC is that we have tried to cover a lot of ground for a lot of years without necessarily specializing very well in particular areas. So some of my concepts for how we move forward are focused on that idea of what space do we really need to fill. We do lobbying at UAC. We work with the state legislature and the federal government, our federal delegation. But we don't put 90% of our time, effort, and money into that. We put some smaller percentage. And I think as a result, we've got to stand back and say, what is it that we need to be lobbying for? What role is it that we have at the state and federal legislature? And so one of my goals is to try to figure that out from our perspective, from the perspective of the people I represent, and then build towards whatever they think they want to be. Education is another piece of that. For a number of years, UAC has provided education of a sort at our meetings. We've had dialogue about issues, but we don't provide the kind of education that I think UCIP does and that some other entities do, which is very targeted on avoiding liability, dealing with things that create liability for you, how do you deal with HR issues, etc. So my hope is that by trying to take a look at what role UAC really needs to play on education, we'll actually do a better job of providing as we go forward. We'll actually spend less time trying to come up with something new and more time recognizing that somebody's already talking about how you address HR issues and how you respond to human resources issues and the potential liability it can create. How do we deal with issues of workplace safety or of sexual harassment? That doesn't need to be something UAC's doing, others are doing. Let's figure out what it is. So I think from my perspective, I want us to be partnering on those issues. UCIP is an obvious partner for us, but it's a great benefit to UAC if we can, simply by saying we showed up and helped to sponsor something or helped to be present, that we can tell people that we're providing a resource for county elected officials and for staff. And from my point of view, that's a great benefit to UAC. And that is one of the very reasons that I want to bring us closer to UCIP as we move forward. Did you have a question?
No, just a comment perhaps, or an observation. In my mind, it makes sense for UAC to think of itself as the policy, legislative side of things, and UCIP as more of the mechanics, the management, the operational type stuff. Both of them had educational components, but one just has a different part of the county phases, I guess, or something like that.
I think that's a great point, and I really like that, because that is, as I look at Commissioner Winterton here, I'm thinking, you know, the reality is, I want him in a room for half an hour to talk about legislative issues or or policy issues or state rules or federal rules that deal with any one of the 100 things that he has to pay attention to. I don't necessarily need him in a room to give him a half an hour on HR policies, because he's got people, some people, who work on that, and he's got people to send to those meetings, and I think that's exactly the point. I like Dave too. I think the issue is we've got issues for county attorneys on the civil side or the criminal side. What's the mechanism we use to train on those things? That's different than turning to the elected county attorney or the appointed county attorney and saying, tell me where you want to go on prison reform and corrections reform. And I think that's a great way to look at it, and that I think is what we're trying to get to. But we've separated ourselves from a lot of those allies over the last few years and said, well, we're going to do this, and then we'll just ignore the fact that all that stuff's being done over there. So I'm hoping we can move forward on that, and I guess that's my question to an extent for everybody here too. And it's an ongoing question, ongoing request to share information and thoughts with me. But the question really is, what would you like UAC to handle as a policy issue? What would you like us to make sure that we hit on as we go forward in our discussions on policy that you may have picked up on at a UCIP training, or that UCIP may have identified as a big issue, a big problem that needs to be addressed? Those are the kinds of questions that, from my perspective, we ought to be dealing with as a policy body, and then we ought to be sharing that as we go through the year to see what we can do. So, to a certain extent, I'll just throw that open. I'd like to know, and I guess I'd ask you too, as an attorney, are there issues that come from here? Is there a way that we could take what the attorneys are hearing, or what staff in the counties are hearing, staff attorneys are hearing, and take that up to the policy level, or things that are policy level issues we need to move back down to others for training for specific issues? Any thoughts from anybody?
And I'll throw an example. Yesterday during Yvonne's presentation on the data records, she mentioned that Virginia had this issue where they had set a policy that said that we're not going to respond to any requests for data that come from out of state. And it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they said, yeah, if that's your policy, then you don't have to respond to requests from out of state. And I think that'd be a great thing for us to work then, because I think that would really help counties. We don't want to see the lawsuit, so to work together to us to first determine, is that a solved enough issue? Do we know that now that the Supreme Court has ruled on that we can implement that into Utah policies and have it stand without having to fight that fight in the courts over and over again? And then, from a policy standpoint, bring that out to the counties and tell them the pros and cons of initiating a policy like that.
Yeah, another case in point was the cyclist on the side of the road. The county having a policy that we're not going to provide a path for a cyclist on every county road. It may be designated on a built bike path. It'd be nice to have those policies in place so that, in Sevier County we have people driving their bikes on the side of the road. I think they're crazy because they're on 6 inches, and then there's the white line, and they're just nuts for riding a bike down that road. But in a lawsuit, the county's going to get nailed. So that was another example, like John just mentioned.
Absolutely. Well, I just ask you to keep bringing those ideas forward. If things occur, if you're talking in your affiliate groups and meetings about issues that really deserve some good education and some thorough education, just know that you can come to me, you can go to whatever source you want, but my goal is going to be to try to find a place that I can make sure that our folks are all getting trained and educated, so we can talk about policy, and we can talk about needs for the organization and the counties as a whole when we get together in our UAC meetings. One of the primary goals I have for UAC over the next year, I think they're going to keep me that long, so I think I can plan that far ahead, but the goal I have, I was looking at Bill because he's been a little uncertain about all the things. Anyway, one of the goals I have is to truly try to unify us more as an organization, and I think that means that we have to be trying to get ties closer with our partners and our natural allies. Whether that means UCIP, which certainly is closely tied to benefit or SWAP, which works with county attorneys, or a number of other entities that are very closely tied to what we do. Special Districts, Local Districts Association is another group that I've had contact with over a period of time, but boy, we have a lot of common interests, we have a lot of common clients, and we have an awful lot of things we could be trying to do to streamline what we're doing and where we go. So that is a primary focus for me and a primary goal, and I know a lot of the people I work for share that, and I want to put that forward as one of the issues too. You know that there have been some separation between UCIP and UAC for a while, and the real reason to come together is exactly that reason of unifying. We have to find natural allies, we have to work with folks who we know we have to rely on, and we have to serve the people who we all serve together. So we may as well find ways to do that and make it enjoyable. So I wanted to just touch base on these things, throw this out there. I think that you will see us at UAC more involved with the training that UCIP's doing. Certainly we will be helping to sponsor events in future and carry some of that burden as necessary. I don't really have too much of anything that I could educate you on, but I'm happy to show up, especially if it's an interesting place to go. And so Johnny and I will keep working on that. But more importantly than anything, we're going to start to talk very definitely and very clearly about what UCIP is providing as training, where they are training some county officials or county staff that we would want to know about, that we would want to be participating in and help to support. We want to be clear that they're going to come and bring issues to us that they're seeing. Johnny's going to present to our USAC group later this month about liabilities issues and what he's seeing, so we can make sure we're hitting people as much as possible with that. We're going to do the same thing with newly elected officials to make clear to them that there's a partnership between us and between UCIP and between all of you who are involved. So,
and
yes.
kind of a preliminary list of who those natural partners are, allies, or...
I do. I think I do. And I'm glad that I sort of named them off. UCIP as an organization certainly is. I think the special districts, the Association of Special Districts, is the same thing. We have conflicts and we butt heads on certain issues at times, but in reality, they are a group that we do an awful lot of work with, and an awful lot of the people are in the same contacts. The AOGs around the state, we have had very little contact with them. Sorry, Corby, I move a lot when I'm but the fact is that the AOGs that are everywhere in the state, that are very tied into your communities, we've had very little contact with them, but they do an awful lot locally that we ought to be partnering with and building on, and I think that's a big issue. There are others, the cities and towns on some issues, school districts on some issues, all those folks that we ought to be tying with more closely that are local and that are not the state or the federal government, because while we want to partner with those folks at times, the reality is that we're not always on the same page as they are. But you have to be on the same page with people locally or it doesn't work, right? So that's a big part of it. I think the Sheriff's Association and the sheriffs tend to be a little more separated from us too, but I think it's something that UCIP helps us to pull closer together on too. So I think there's a lot out there, and it really is a question of how much we want to do, how hard we want to push, and how dedicated we want to be to the idea. So I appreciate your comments. I really don't have anything else. If you have questions or comments, I'm glad to have them. But I really appreciate the chance to be here, and I will see you more. I'll see some of you very soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Well, is anybody really disappointed and want their money back? I hope it was useful for you. I know that not every single session is going to hit your area of expertise right on point, but hopefully, I really think that every session had some component in it that no matter what department you're from, you could take something home from it. And you know, I often